Hey everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I'm your host, Andrew Davis. And before I introduce my guest, I would like to remind everyone you need to support and financially support what you love, whether it is this show, my guest's comic, or corporate media. I personally do not care as long as you are supporting something you love and want to see more of it get made because it is important to do that. But enough about that, as I have with me sort of a returning guest, and he's a comic creator and owner of lesser known comics, Mark Bernal. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Andrew. It's been
You're,
far
you're
too
sort of
long.
back. You're sort of back because I don't
Sort
think
of back.
we ever did a formal interview in the sense that I think you were on Pops' show with me on my request, and I think you might have been in a comic hangout with me at something, or maybe everything's all jumbled up. But you're sort of your first interview is this on this show at the very least.
I think
So
you're right, actually. Yeah, because I think Gabe and Ray came on your show, but that was yeah. This is cool. It's cool. Now I'm stoked.
So that's why I said sort of, and obviously I'm being very playful right now, but obviously I'm happy to have you on because you are at the end of your Kickstarter right now for Either Them or Us. And I know you're fully funded on it. I know that it wasn't a big goal, but it is still important to get funded nonetheless. And what is that comic? Because some people know it, some people do not know it, and obviously people are going to see this interview and they're going to be curious about what the basic premise is of the book.
Yeah, so it's Samurai versus Witches in 1980s Japan. So it's the first full length one that I've gotten to work on. For people who know, I've done like 8 different books with lesser known comics, all these minis as I was getting to know all the illustrators I wanted to work with. And so I've made all these short stories that happen in the same universe, but this is the first one where me and the illustrator, Franco Luna, were like, okay, we're going to dive in, full 22-page story. And it was not the first full length like comic that I wanted to work on. It was just the one that like Franco as an illustrator was like, nah, man, like this is what I want to draw, So like we moved some things around. We had some part of the story that I had written out, as canon, but not had as full scripted comics. And when your illustrator's stoked to draw stuff, you just kind of have to like strike while the iron's hot. So that's where we ended up. Yeah, and so we launched on the 18th of October, and it's live till the 6th of November.
Yeah, and let's even talk a little bit about this because obviously everything at this point has been mashed up. Whether that is robots for zombies, princesses for zombies, you name it, it's been mashed up. And I'm sure there's been some version of this as well. But I don't think this has been heavily seen where witches versus samurai. And so, what was this like really building this out? Because people like a good mashup. People also want more than just, I guess, mashup in 2022. And you're going back to the 1980s. Japan is also a very cool place. And obviously, I think the samurai have somewhat home advantage there, but there's a lot of moving parts. And so, where was this idea even formed? Because it is a little bit beaten off the path, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so I've always been intrigued with like the crossing of cultures. Some of our storyline in the lesser known universe takes place in California. Some of it takes place in South America. Um, but both of those places have a heavy Japanese and Chinese influence. So we had introduced some characters that um, had originated from Japan, and we already had some timelines. We had one character, Danny, who is basically living as a in the 1980s. She's living as a witchcraft arms dealer in South America, and some of her clientele is Japanese. So that's where we link those two timelines together. And in one of the pages from Lesser Known Comics number 3, just as one of those side plots, we had these Japanese witches that were dropping off some sort of mysterious artifact, down in South America. They have to get it away from somebody, and that's all we really said in that issue. Um, and as I was working with Franco, and he said, "Okay, what's the deal with these witches? Like, who are they hiding it from?" And I had told them, oh, they had a generational long feud with the samurai that goes back to, the witches playing a part in getting rid of, samurai culture out of Japan. Um, and, we walked it through World War II and Reconstruction and the war tribunals and them trying to use that to pit, put each other, at a disadvantage. So he was like, that's the story I want to work on. And East Asia has always been something that's been super interesting to me. My wife, she's from the Philippines, but she's also she speaks Chinese, so we spent a lot of time in East Asia. That's just a place that she likes to travel to. And then obviously, like Japan is like such a rich place for comic books, everything from manga to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, and then obviously, I mean, you're in the 1980s, so the samurai go back to the Edo era and things of that nature, and even before that. And obviously, samurai have a long history, but obviously, the 1980s, you do not have Bushido the same way. You do not have, daimyos walking around. You don't have lords. You don't have, an executioner for the shogun. And you don't have people trying to overturn the shogun and whatnot. And so, what is this like? Because obviously, the theme of the samurai in 1980 Japan is not the same as it is in the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s Japan. And so, what was that like too? Because much like witches, I don't want to say a samurai is a pariah, but it's not the same. Like, I don't think samurai are walking around in Japan today, the same way that they were, 300 years ago. So, what was that like? Because and the 80s are 40 years ago, so it's not like it's way back in the day. I mean, 40 years ago is still 40 years ago. But you get the point, I think, everybody.
Yeah. So, and maybe because I had been, rereading Watchmen recently, and I was really intrigued by that alternative history. So we made like an alternative, like main capital city in Japan. It's called Kaijo City, and I kind of like the idea that, if um, in the process of this rivalry between witches and in the samurai, that perhaps they had competing companies that were like a face of a company, like those new emergence of the global or multinational corporations, in the 1980s, and then kind of that race to modernize, because that's what the 80s was about, right? Like, Japan was like leading this technology. So what would uh, a samurai look like in the 1980s? Would they use, firearms? Would they fly around in a helicopter? Um, and are there female samurais and all that stuff? So the first issue, we don't go through all of it. We just throw you a bunch of stuff to hopefully confuse the shit out of you, to be like, what is all this rad stuff and why is it all happening now? And you get a little bit of a glimmer of that in that first issue, but certainly enough to be like, yes, I need some more. Because it is the 1980s. There's some things that we wanted to, harken back to some of the like cartoons and things like that we loved. The henchmen that are part of the samurai crew do look very like, somewhere between like Foot Clan and Cobra Command. Like they look very, very retro, but also, anytime you can have, katanas and giant, grappling hook guns in the same like page sequence, like I wanted to do that. And Franco's always been somebody who our illustrator has always been somebody who's done action scenes very well. So in that case, and he's also been somebody who's done his reference work very well. So I was able to create some space for him to do action scenes, and where I could bend the lore around those action scenes, I could, and where I couldn't, we'd make some edits. But for the most part, I think he hit it out of the park.
Yeah, and let's even talk about that too, because obviously, when you go back to the 80s, I mean, let's be realistic. Technology in 2022 has advanced so far. In the last 4 years, it's advanced massively. And if you go back 42 years ago, technology was starting to emerge. The internet really wasn't a thing in the 1980s. It was starting to come out. And if you were the uber wealthy in 1981, 1982, maybe you were getting onto the internet. But remember, there was nothing on the internet at that point, you know, and also all the stuff where cars were going a certain way, and even the idea of cable coming, really started coming in, in full blast in the 1980s and started coming there. And that's when the era of cartoons sort of happened in a lot of ways. And so, what is that like? Because you have all this emerging technology, but you also don't have an iPhone in the 1980s. And so it sort of does, I think, help to make the comic, focus on the comic. And also, you don't need to have, I guess, justification per se why they can't call for help. You know what I mean? Like, and it sounds weird, but if you write a book in today's age, you expect your characters to be able to call anybody they want in the world for help. And
Yeah,
that's a modern problem with comics right now.
yeah, I I'm not somebody who's been writing comics for a long time, but I was surprised how and maybe it's the amount of movies and other pop culture that I'm like that I'm in front of. But I had to think about that a little bit for some of the trade craft of we have characters. We have one character who's a spotter who's trying to, um, as samurais, looking for their enemy. They're trying to find what building they're in. Right, in modern technology, right? You use thermal scanners, and you'd use, you'd be eavesdropping on phones and cell phones and all that stuff. But in this case, it was just the good old fashioned, oh, let's send somebody into the building, you know, and, look at the directory, or maybe ask the janitor a question, like, hey, I'm looking for such and such, building. It's supposed to be, or such and such company. It's supposed to be on the eighth floor. And that janitor gives them a, oh, there's nothing on the eighth floor, type of answer. And he comes out of, oh, that's, the eighth floor is where we want to look, that type of trade craft. So, you know, uh, maybe it's a lot of watching movies, um, but I found that stuff really fun, and it almost felt, uh, a little tropey to write, but also like refreshingly, like, true to the craft, right? Where we can set up those scene changes that felt very like, um, uh, we have showing people, you know, doing their part on the ground versus, like, the second that scene ends, you got the helicopters doing apocalypse now type of situation, descending on the city, to go find where the spotter was looking. Um, I don't know. I know I'm getting caught up in my own excitement of it.
Yeah, and to even talk about that, because this is one of the things that I think is sort of, problematic with modern comics. It's the idea that, when you have modern technology, you need a justification why I can't use my iPhone, or why I can't go to Walmart and I'm dealing with a zombie apocalypse, or a werewolf is trying to hunt me, why I can't go buy a Winchester and shoot the werewolf. And it raises questions. And I think part of the issue here is that if you go back to the 1980s, you go to the 1960s, or you go back to a certain era, technology didn't exist. And therefore, you don't need to answer those questions. And it eliminates a problem. And it also suspends belief. When I go
Mhm.
back to the 1980s in a book, or even like I was rewatching The Karate Kid, you understand that you could see how that story would make sense. And then you watch Cobra Kai, and I think they've done a good job with it, but everybody has an iPhone in Cobra Kai. And so that's in that, when something goes wrong and then there's a big fight and they're getting attacked, like they're not calling an adult, like, or they're not calling the rest of their crew when one guy's cornered. Like, there's an issue of belief that hasn't been suspended, I feel. And I feel like you've sort of solved that to some degree. And I think it's just a problem in comics, but maybe I'm being picky at this point.
I think, I mean, my wife complains about it. She reads all the whodunit murder mystery things, and then always within the first chapter, we have to solve the cell phone problem. Yeah, and I think it's difficult when you're writing when you're writing a serious story, because one of my favorite writers, who is the guy who did Tank McGregor, Ray Garza. Well, he's very comedic, right? So like he would have just been like, "Oh, my space cell phone is out of space minutes," and like that would have been the way that he writes it off, and he would have made some like dad joke about it, versus having to like, solve it in real time. But I guess one of the other things that somebody told me as a writer is whatever rules you set up, you kind of have to, get the audience to buy into that set of rules, and then you got to stick to those set of rules, throughout the story.
There's a good position. So I don't know. I'm a huge wrestling fan, and anybody who knows me, I love wrestling. Last night I was watching deathmatch wrestling. I was watching War Games, and I have to believe that when they set a table on fire, that they didn't. I mean, they actually really did set the table on fire, but it was clearly staged. But I believed in the story what they were telling, and it wasn't the table being on fire. It was this story of betrayal and somebody doing this, and it was a 6-month buildup, and it was arguably the greatest comic book story I ever watched. 6 months in the making, where brilliant, brilliant. I mean, I recommend anybody watch the H2O buildup to this. This is like comic book 101, but I believed in the story. And so all the weapons and all of the light tube smashing, and it was a death match, War Games match, and all of that, I believed in what they were doing, and they caught me and they suspended belief. Because if you hit somebody on the head with a cookie sheet, they're not going to kick out of a pinfall so quickly. I guarantee you that if I hit you with a cookie sheet pretty hard, I don't think that you'd be standing here. You're like, I'm good. You know what I mean? But I think that's a problem that a lot of comic people face right now is you don't get me to suspend belief.
Yeah, and I think, and I've seen some awesome stories. I don't think it has to do with reality, but I think it's the ability to pull somebody into that actual story. One of the best books that was at, Baltimore Comic Con is a book called Tough Stuff by a guy named Kevin Delgado. It's about a crime fighting cat that's hooked on cocaine, and like, but it's the writing's well done, the art's well done. It pulls you in, and like, so it's like, I think it's just one of those things that whatever universe you pull them into, you got to make it good enough that they're blocking out what else is going on in the world.
Let's look at a great book. Let's look at One Piece. One Piece pulls people in for a few reasons. Luffy's an eccentric character. They're going on a crazy adventure. They're starting at the very beginning when they're all weak, and then they're growing as a crew and as friends, and they're exploring a world that's eccentric. And you don't know what the hell's going to happen in One Piece, and you don't know how stupid Luffy's going to be 1 minute and then be absolutely insane the next. And then there's those moments where Nami is crying, and Luffy just puts the straw hat on her and then goes to beat the shit out of Arlong. And like, it's the idea that show brings you along an emotional roller coaster in so many different ways, and there's so many eccentric components to it that they draw you in and they keep you there. And that's the other thing too, is that you have a great issue 1, you gotta keep me there for issue 2, 3, and 4. And I think that's also the other problem too, because I don't know about you, but how many books have you dropped after issue 2 of a book?
Yeah. Oh, I think,
roughly. I'm not asking for a real number, but I'm asking.
yeah.
I'm asking a point versus a number.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think about the old X-Men ones, or just any of that golden age where it doesn't even matter what the cliffhanger was. They really knew how to keep you on that cliffhanger, right? Like, I was joking with somebody about the first X-Men run, 1 through 68. Like, story quality aside, like, that was a busy year for the X-Men. That was like no downtime for them. But I think that generation of storytellers really knew how to be like, oh crap, like what next? And I get what you're saying too on One Piece, because like, it definitely, there's nothing predictable that's in there.
I mean, I'm seeing One Piece Red, in a few days. And I mean, there's a reason why I'm not doing anything on Thursday night. That's what I'm doing. And I'm pumped for it. My friends are pumped for it. I know a bunch of wrestlers who are pumped for it. And all these One Piece fans. And look, I haven't watched One Piece and I haven't read One Piece in a while, but I know what's going on. And I'm excited for it. Like, because I know that it's going to be insane in 2.5 hours, the movie. It's going to be amazing. And I know for a fact that we're going to go on a crazy adventure and then I'm going to be glued to that entire movie for 2 hours. And it's going to be a well spent 2 hours for $15. And I'm going to be talking about it with my friends for the next like month because it's going to be that good. And that's the whole thing though, because I know how insane it's going to be. And I know that every second is going to matter in that show. And so like that's how I feel. But even going back into your story, because one of the things about your story that's interesting also to be in this full circle, and even that, I mean, obviously you're hooking somebody onto a line where you're throwing a lot of stuff at them, you're giving them a little bit to nibble at. And what is that like too? Because they've already had a bite with a bunch of lesser known comic stuff. Because there were 8, I think, mini issues, I want to say, sort of prior to all this. I think some of them are in the universe. Some of them may or may not have to be slightly revised. I know issue 3 is sort of a jumping off point for this book in a lot of ways for lesser known comics. And so what is that like too? Because they've had a taste prior to this issue, but this is sort of the first full thing coming out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think what's been frustrating for me is I'm glad that I got to do all these minis, but I don't have, like I have so many buddies who already have the graphic novel or they already have their first 4-issue story arc, like 88 pages combined, right? And I've been anxious to be like at
We're
that
going to
point
talk about
too.
that too. I
Yeah.
promise. We're going to talk about that too. But continue.
And so it's been exciting to kind of like be in that. The other part too, just because anybody see me on any podcast to hear me talk about the X-Men all the time. I was Magneto, such a more likable and more compelling character compared to Professor X, and that's like something that as I'm working on multiple story arcs, some of the antagonists in one story arc may be the protagonist in another story arc that a different illustrator is working on with me, and that's been really cool for me. So even though I will have full issues out, I'm also like torturing myself in the fact that I'm excited to make the people that you hated in this story arc be the people that you love in a different story arc, or vice versa. And that's all
So
just a waiting game, I guess.
let's even talk about that too, because this is something that I think people don't understand. And obviously, I just interject myself into this a little bit. I don't feel like I get enough credit for what I do. Where I'm a podcaster, I am not producing a book because I have an eBay business that is producing me a good sizable amount of cash, and it's a healthy business, and I'm dealing with that. And so for me to take the funds that would fund that business and do a book doesn't make any economic sense for me. And to bring this to you, I think it's similar, is that obviously you look at people who have a graphic novel out, you look at people who have first arc out or 4 issues, or they're approaching issue 4 on Kickstarter or independently funding it, but you're the head of a company. And I think this is what people don't realize. And I don't think people give credit to either me or you, where it's like, wait a second, you're doing something that is building a company, and obviously you have equity in the company. Now, I don't know how much money you made from the company, but that's not the point. Where you have something that is equity, which is a money equivalent. I have a business that is cash flow positive, buying and selling comics. And I think people, don't realize that what you're doing is that you're basically creating a small publishing company, and you are a small publisher, or an indie publisher at that. So what is that like? Because I think it's a real problem where you don't get credit for it. And people who are actually running businesses and running podcast stuff, and maybe they're only doing 1 episode a week, and somebody else is doing 10, those people don't get credit yet. They're supporting and they're, running a healthy business, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think you know,
There's a
um,
misconception, I think, is a good word.
yeah, and I think one of the other parts too is that I try not to place too much stake into what our presence is on social media. But we've had a good following, and I think people also think that we're a bigger company than we are, you know, by virtue of the fact that so many people work with us, and then now that like people who are working with us are getting picked up on bigger publishers, people who are working with bigger publishers are bringing stories to us, um, and um, but really at the end of the day, I have a 9 to 5 job that pays the bills. Then I do this. This is what I do instead of like a lot of people play video games or have maybe they work out or maybe they meal prep or whatever they do with their the rest of the time of their day. Um, and I have a job that affords me a lot of spare time so that I'm able to go to like comic book conventions and stuff like that. Um, and uh, so another one, Tank McGregor, beautifully done book. That dude's got a full time job. Tank McGregor is his side thing. Same thing with It's a Horror Show that's coming out next month. Beautifully done book. That guy, he's a full time art teacher. Um,
So,
so
so to even talk about this too, because one of the things is that, and the reason why I say my business is that my business is cash flow positive. It changes my economic bracket in a very different way, and I don't want to explain it. I have a 9 to 5 job. My 9 to 5 job, if I just did that, I would be perfectly fine in my life in the long run.
mhm.
Um, as long as I don't get fired, which I'm doing my hardest not to. Um, and I'm like, this is legitly day. And I actually don't know the day. This is, I think, like day like maybe like 29. So it's like day 29 of my job, everybody. So but anyway, I digress. I digress. Beyond that, but yeah, I mean, I have a healthy business, and that's the other thing too, is that I don't really think social media matters so much anymore. I think what really matters is that if you're profitable, because let's be realistic, how many people in comics do you know? I know a lot who came into comics, they are not making much money, they have debt, they barely make any money, they're living, paycheck to paycheck, they don't have a battle plan for retirement, and then they get a bonus or they get their tax refund and they pump that whole thing into it. They do well on one Kickstarter that does double what they want. They pump that whole thing into it, and then 3, 4 Kickstarters down the road, they're broke.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things too is that if
It's the C
if
word. It's the C word, and it's not the C word everybody thinks. It's called cash flow.
Yeah, well, that's the other part of it too. Is I think some people will come to a publisher and they think, oh, like the publisher's here to solve all my problems. I'm going to make this
Which you
book
will not. Let's
and I'm
clarify
going to
that.
hit. I'm gonna hand it to this publisher, and then just like money's just gonna start showing up at my doorstep. And that's really not the case. Yeah, if you see the people, whether they're published on a small indie publisher or they're published on somebody like Image or Dark Horse,
I'm gonna let you
they
finish, and I want to throw you something. I want to throw you a question following up, but continue.
but they're hustling. They're hustling a lot, and those bigger publishers don't do a lot to promote that book, you know. And what can be a bummer is the idea that on a day that I'm sick or my kid's sick, because I'm sick tonight, right? You know, um, but that's um, I'm trying to be in a place where I'm in working relationships where folks know that there's people involved so that, they'll treat you like a human and not like an ATM machine. Because yes, when you start investing into a company and people start being part of a company, they need to understand that you're a human being and not somebody that's just like, going to write them blank checks and stuff like that. That's been um, and luckily the folks that I've been working with, um, don't treat me like that. They understand, like they may hit me up with some questions and they know, hey, I'm putting my kids to bed, or I'm taking somebody to, kids to preschool, or I'm, sleeping off this weekend
I'll
because I
throw
had
you
a
something. I'll
long
throw you
weekend with
another
with
one.
Baltimore. Yeah.
I'll tell you another one. Maybe once a month, you need to take your wife out to dinner. And then it sounds crazy. And so you're like, oh, Mark's being lazy and he's not answering his phone call. But guess what? And this is going to sound messed up, but you're maintaining your marriage. Right now I'm single, but if I have a girlfriend, obviously I take Thursday nights off because I'm a huge wrestling fan. I like to watch wrestling on Thursdays, but there's a reason why I do that because I'll work Friday, I'll work Saturday, I'll work Sunday. I have a 9 to 5 job, but I take a personal day off. And then when I'm in a relationship, hopefully my partner, she's going to understand that, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I'm busy during the evening, but Mondays, Thursdays, Friday nights, we're going to have us time and it's not my business's time. And then when I have kids, it's going to be similar where, obviously there's going to be nights that are for me and for my business, but, that's something when I have people, I'm hoping that, at some point I'm going to grow what I'm doing where I might have a few people or partners and they're going to tell me when they need those nights because I think it is very crucial. And I think actually people who work most efficiently understand time off and also figure out how to schedule their life so they have personal time. So I think you do better when you have personal time and then you have work time and then you have a nice healthy mixture of both.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And, at the end of the day, yes, money and cash flow and all that stuff is important. It's at the end of the day, what's going to help you do all the things that you need to do. But I know plenty of miserable people who have money, and no
But do they have
relationships.
a jet ski? Do they have a jet ski?
Yeah, I know.
Maybe that's the
Jets.
issue right there.
It's hard to be in a bad mood on a jet ski. Yeah.
It's hard to be in a bad mood in a Ferrari, except if you're in the Ferrari and you were driving and you crashed into something.
Yeah.
I'm just
So,
saying, a crash the Ferrari is not a fun Ferrari.
but yeah, but I also know a lot of people who own a lot of nice things and never get to enjoy them, because they're too busy, you know, uh, what is it? It's like being house poor, right? You bought something you couldn't afford. Now you're working all day to maintain the thing, that you can't afford. Um, but yeah, yeah, luckily, Doug Knight, he just did the chiasm book. Yeah, he's got 2 kids, and so me and him are able to both relate as creators, as business owners, as parents, and then we talk about that too when we're collaborating with other people individually of each other, right? Hey, I'm working with this person, and this was a really good part of that relationship because this is some flexibility or respect that this person afforded me, and it says a lot. And those types of things, um, that reputation makes it around the scene as well. I've had writers come to me and they say, I'm looking for an illustrator. I'm like, I know the person for you. This person gets their work done on time. You know, they label all their stuff correctly, but not only that, but like, you know, um, you will be happy every time they call you. They're like a fucking joy to talk to on the phone. Because some people you work with, it's like every day of their life is the worst day of their life, and that gets pretty exhausting to deal with. Does it, talent aside, right? If you're the fucking, dookie in people's Cheerios, like no one wants no one wants that in their life.
Yeah, so even to follow up everything that we were just talking about, because you're saying that people hustle with publishers, and this is my view, and I'm coming at it from a very different angle because obviously I buy and sell comics on eBay, and so when I look at retail packages and I look at other things and I look at comic shops, my whole thing is that you don't want your books to be in a comic shop and not to sell through. Because if you're a creator, the worst thing that could ever happen to your reputation is that your book doesn't sell through and that a comic shop ordered 50 copies of your book and only sold 5 of them. What happens is that if a comic shop sold 49 copies of your book and couldn't sell the last one, that's not a bad disaster. It still is annoying, but it's only one book. And if they mark it down for $1, it will move eventually. But you don't want your books not to move. And so I think a lot of people, and this is just my take, I've noticed, and I mean, there's certain stories that I've seen being picked up by publishers, and I'm like, these are average stories, and stores must be hungry for other content that's not Marvel and DC. But I don't know if these books are really moving. And even still, how much money are you making as a creator going through publishing versus hustling it yourself at a con? And that's the other thing, too, that I think people don't realize is that if you're doing 15 to 20 cons a year anyway, then you going through a publisher and losing the right to sell your book at a con is a big loss, especially if you've been doing this long enough. And if you're on your 20th Kickstarter and you've built a reputation and you've built, your name in the indie scene and even going up to small publishing and small press, I mean, you could be giving up tens of thousands of dollars. And so I'm curious your thoughts on that too, because I don't know how many copies of a book you need to sell through a comic shop to make up that loss, unless the only thing that I can think of is that you're basically trying to get a better deal, essentially, with Marvel and DC or Image, in that sense. And that you're going through a publisher as a resume block for you versus a money block. But I prefer money every time versus a resume block. I really do, because with money, I can do whatever I want with it. With a resume block, it's cool and it's nice on a piece of paper, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, I think, and I hate to admit this, but I think it's especially for an indie creator. You talk to indie creators and you talk about what is paying their bills. Kickstarter and con sales are making up about 90% of what they're bringing in. And I say Kickstarter generically, crowdfunding and conventions is what's bringing in 90% of their bills. Even if they get into brick and mortar, they're in diamond and they're in previews and stuff like that, right? You're selling your book at 55%, cover price. So like what you're making 5 cents off the book. Let's just say you're doing, 10,000 books, in the year, through diamond. Still, that's 10,000 nickels, so and that's assuming you don't have to pay other third parties for promotions and advertising and all that kind of stuff. So with that regard, I don't I there's some notoriety. I think sometimes people can get discouraged. They see somebody run a crowdfunding campaign. They're like, this is the person's first campaign ever, and then they like put up these insane numbers. But those are typically people who are coming from investing years and years into resume building, and then they have that name recognition that they're bringing from the top, the big three.
It's also the idea is that, I mean, look, I've backed people from the big three and from building their names, and their books were average. I mean, people give me shit for this. I got no problem. Eric July's book is an average book. I said it before, the crowdfunding was done. I said, I think you're going to be getting what you paid for. You're probably getting less than what you paid for, where the art was great, but the story was average. There was nothing special about that book. And even the Wesley Snipes book, and not to beat two people up, the whole point of the Wesley Snipes book was that it was Wesley Snipes involved in a comic. There wasn't anything new about that book. But then you go to somebody whose brand new Kickstarter is happening, and they're at least testing something brand new, and they did $1,200 on $1,000 goal. So, I mean, this is one of the things that Ty Lopez was speaking about, is you go to Barnes & Noble, all the books at the front of Barnes & Noble have been paid to be put there. All the stuff in a supermarket that's eye level has been paid to be put there. The only two items in a supermarket that do not get paid to be put in are milk and bread. And where are milk and bread located? At the end of the supermarket, in the corner, because they want you to go through every single aisle to go get it. So if you want to find real knowledge and what you actually need, it's in the corners of where you're looking. And you will find every good story in a dark corner on Kickstarter that will blow your mind. But that's what I think.
That's a great point, man. And I think
nobody listens to me. Nobody listens to me. It's amazing. If people all you have to do, everybody, is just listen to me on this show once a month and listen to 3 interviews, and you will have nuggets of knowledge for life. Not chicken nuggets, but nuggets nonetheless.
Yeah. That's a great point because yeah, my favorite indie book, you know, has been by somebody who I don't know if he's ever going to do the fourth issue. I've gotten the first 3 issues of it, and one of those books, right? That you you're just like where you have the audible oh shit when you're reading it, right? Wife wakes up like what happened? It's like nothing. Comic books are happening, and. Um, and you're right. And I wish that the big two or the big three didn't have the amount of shelf space that they do in the average comic shop. You know, um, I think that if you look at comic shops in the Great Lakes region that put the indie stuff forward, like they almost like the same way as like we get dressed in the morning, we pick the clothes we want to wear, we wear something that's unique to somebody else, from somebody else. Um, they do that up there. There's you see some things, you see some books, and I'm talking about underground like press publications like Silver Sprocket, like that is underground punk rock, indie publisher. But I see some of their books sprinkled here in Detroit and over here in, Seattle or something like that. Um, uh, and it's almost like when you walk into the store, you could get a sense of the that store's taste and appreciation for good comic books because you're like, oh yeah, I like what they have featured up right now. It's not big two or it's not big three, but they got the right books. So then when you go and ask them for the recommendation, they're not going to tell you, some cookie, the art's good and the story's okay on this one. They're going to show you something that's going
I,
to like
I, I think
knock your
I
socks
think
off.
I also think it's complicated, and I think a lot of people have actually burned a lot of bridges. Look, I mean, I don't recommend things to my friends on anime all that often, but when I tell my friends to go check out an anime, they stop whatever they're doing and they watch it. And because I don't recommend things, even when people ask me for recommendations on books, I'm like, look, what is, I'm not going to go recommend you anything if it's not good. I mean, it's also the reason why that, I mean, I say that people want to advertise, say, okay, what's your book? I refused a good chunk of money late last year for this show because I did not believe in that person, what they were selling, because it's my reputation. And I can tell when a store is recommending dog shit, and it's not that hard. Not to, and I can even tell when Kickstarter is doing it. Hell, I can tell when Indiegogo is doing it. I can tell when a bunch of people on YouTube on both sides of the comic spectrum are doing it. I'm like, but this book is horrible. Why are you recommending it? And you look at who's doing it and like, oh, I get it, because it's your friend or they paid you a boatload of money. I mean, I've been on a bunch of people's things and they have, all these top people recommending their thing. And I'm like, wait a second, this book though isn't that good. Like, what am I missing here with this book? That 4 or 5 top Marvel people I recommended it, unless the thing I'm missing is that they're either friends with the person asked for a quote, or money was exchanged. But then I look at those people and I look at those writers, I'm like, well, you lost credibility. But then you look at somebody who clearly didn't get paid, they make a recommendation, and they're like, oh my God, the book's brilliant. And then I say, okay, that writer has a point, and then that writer's credibility goes up.
Yeah, I think you're right too, in the fact that that's actually how I made friends with Dan Price from Bigfoot Knows Karate. And so he's got a book called Bigfoot Knows Karate, and I had just been on podcast being like kind of praising the work that he was doing, and I didn't know the guy, and then eventually like our paths did cross, and I was like, oh, hey dude, I talk about your book all the time.
I just got Casey on. Dan couldn't make it, which I was bummed out about. I actually wanted to, know Dan, and I was bummed out about it. I'm like, oh man, I was bummed out. Me and Casey had a good interview, but I was bummed out about it. I really was. And that's not a knock at Dan, but I was disappointed because I really wanted to talk to both of them. I thought I didn't know Casey as much as I knew Dan's work before, so I was really upset. I'm still upset. So Dan owes me an interview. Let's just leave it at that.
I'll let him know. I actually talked to him quite a bit now, which is cool. He's actually
which
turned
will
into.
probably be in January or February or March because I'm taking a break from comics. Everybody, I'm exhausted from all you comic people. You're technically actually that's not true. Mike Barron's coming on tomorrow, which is going to be very controversial. That's going to be a very controversial interview. With Mike Barron, who does not sound controversial. But continue, please. Anyway.
Yeah. So there's some people out there, right? There's some people out there that they're going to tell you what you think, or tell you what they think, and they're not going to mince words, and there's nothing in it for them, and you can tell that what they say, has that objectivity because they have no stake in feeding you bullshit.
I'm curious about this too now, and I hate to interrupt, but so when people ask my opinion, what I like to do is I like to give honesty, but I also like to give, compliments. So I've openly spoke to wrestlers on my show, criticizing certain elements of them, but then I said, you did this thing brilliantly. And I said, I don't think that you were put into a fair situation in that. And I think that you didn't do your best job, but I didn't think you also were given a fair shot. And so I've openly said that to wrestlers, but then I said, look, you were in this other promotion and you're the star there. So clearly, whatever it is that it just didn't click in that other environment. And so, but I've also said to people, look, that was a rough match. In wrestling, I said with people in comms, I said the first half of your book was rough. The second half was a hell of a lot better. If you legitimately gave me 3 panels from the first half of your book and gave me 15 great pages and only gave me 18 pages, your first issue would have been superstar. If your second issue looks like the last 15 pages of your book, you're golden. But I don't like to just give raw criticism or say your book sucked and here's why. I like to find or at least give a reason why.
And it shouldn't be surprising, right? Because there's definitely criticism to be had on the books that I've made. One, because I'm a new comic book creator. Two, because every time you work with illustrators, you learn stuff, right? And it's almost like every time you go, through this process, you have an idealistic picture of what you want this thing to look like. But then to whatever degree that you and everybody working on the project get on that same wavelength, right? And it's almost like, dude, you're in my head, right? And so, yeah, if somebody says, oh yeah, Mark, the writing, is a little like wonky here, between page 6 and 7 or something like that, or whatever, right? It's sort of some random page. And I would be like, yeah, because the illustration was doing this thing and I was trying to write to the illustration and maybe I didn't hit it on the head, right? Or maybe the illustrator, might, the criticism was towards them, right? They'd be like, yeah, we tried to do this thing sequentially. I thought it looked rad, but not everyone else agreed, or something like that,
And look,
but it shouldn't surprise anybody, right?
But also sometimes I'll give you an example, right? And I'll use wrestling because wrestling is a better example of it. Sometimes just a match just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Sometimes you have a circumstance where a match doesn't work. And guess what? It was only 10 minutes. And so guess what? I'm not saying that you want your issue 3 to suck, but maybe issue 3 or maybe a mini series just didn't work, right? It doesn't mean that it was bad. It just means that maybe the concept didn't hit. Maybe, for whatever reason, you and the artist were at odds fighting by issue 3, and he was being pulled in direction A and you were in direction B, and you compromised, but the thing just became good. It didn't become great. You know what I mean? Or maybe whatever, maybe you both worked your asses off, but the book just didn't hit. It happens, you know, and it's all right. I mean, there's plenty of books that just don't hit. And that doesn't mean it's a bad job, but that also, you know, and then people criticize. And, you know, it's just life, because guess what? Maybe people are just not into it. And that's fine too.
Yeah, it's always surprising to me because we always anytime we finish a book, I'm always stoked on the illustration, and then I feel super bad about the writing, and the same thing with the illustrators. I always feel like, yeah, like they're like, oh, I'm sorry, the illustration didn't live up to the writing. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I feel the exact. There's so much imposter syndrome out there, but good criticism comes from a good place.
That's interesting that you bring up imposter syndrome, because at this stage, I'm almost 10 years in, and I've had everybody from somebody legitly 3 matches into their career in wrestling, not knowing how I'm supposed to do it, all the way up to Chris Daniels and Kazarian from AEW. And I've run the gauntlet everywhere in between. I've done top people in comics. I've done top cosplayers. I've done, people, top wrestlers, top comic people, top voice actors and actresses. And every time I do one of these interviews and I shoot somebody a message, I'm like, yeah, I have no right to do this. I mean, like literally 2 months ago, I did the Bushwhackers. I had no right to be in that interview and doing it and being the host on my show. On my show, I had no right to do it. And I don't know how I've done it. And, people still think that I'm like a stupid kid, and that I don't know anything, which is amazing because they clearly haven't looked at my body of work. But again, it's so interesting that you bring up imposter syndrome, because I really should not be where I'm at, yet I keep asking, and oddly enough, I keep getting yes, which either means I'm asking at the right time, these people don't get asked, or I actually do belong and I have the resume and I have the track record despite the viewership, where all these other people wouldn't have said yes if I wasn't supposed to be interviewing them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I found myself in some situations too uh, where I was surprised that the faces in the room turned to me for the deciding opinion. Well, hey, Mark, you know best. What and it's like, it's always uncomfortable, like to be the adult in the room, because I think especially with us who are into all these aspects of pop culture, we all feel like a kid at heart. So anytime when we're supposed to be the mature voice of reason in the room, we're like, oh, okay, this seems weird. You know, I was literally just talking about video games and wrestling a second ago.
It's very weird when people start asking you for advice. And I haven't been asked. I've been asked advice on certain things in comics, on more of an economic level. But it's even weirder when you get asked life advice for people with what to do with certain circumstances in their life. And oh my God, that have real monetary consequences. That's real pressure right there. But yeah, no, it's weird where I've not been in a massive situation. My show isn't a decision-making show. As much as I would like it to be that way, and then it should be, I should just control everybody's life just like that. We just one Thanos snap away. Yeah. I've been waiting to use that line forever. I have like 14 others up my sleeve, or snap away. I'm in a very playful mood right now. And no, there's nothing in my tea. I just want to clarify that too. There's been plenty of other things in my tea prior interviews, but not the point. Yeah, it's super interesting. And then even to go further into this too, because obviously this is your first Kickstarter that you are the sole quarterback on, where you're the creator. Obviously, you own lesser known comics. I know you've done 4 others, I think, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. Let's see. 2, 3.
I think this
For
is the fifth one on this one. On this and this.
this would be the eighth Kickstarter that I've run, but it'd be the first one that it's just my book and
And
only
I
and
think it's the fifth one on the lesser known comics
yeah,
profile.
and
That's why I know it. Where
yeah,
I didn't know where the other three were run. That's why.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't know.
yes,
I don't know all the inner workings, everybody.
yeah. So, but that brings up a good point. Is this has been a much lower like stress campaign because it wasn't somebody else's book. So we just finished doing Yuriko, which was David
Really?
Lujan,
This
and
is interesting there. Now, go into this because I would tend to think it would be the opposite.
so there is pressure because I want to feel like I guess I belong with the rest of the creators because it's almost like even though it's my company, it almost feels like, oh, it's like my dad's company. Oh, you're only here, Mark, because your dad owns the company or something, right? Like it, because I have almost two personas as the business owner, but then as like the creative. So I want to show that I belong in this group, but at the same time, um, if the campaign falls, falls flat or anything like that, um, I don't have to have a difficult conversation with the creator and being like, "Hey, I'm really sorry I didn't hold up my end of the bargain as your publisher to like help make this campaign a success." Um, and because we're actually a lot more involved in the Kickstarters with the creators than most publishers, we actually help put the metrics and the model together to say, okay, this is where I think your campaign is going to get in 72 hours. This is what I think we can raise in 30 days, and really help them like come
Yeah,
up
I
with
could have used that. I could have used that on mine. I could have used like a freaking helping hand. Instead, I got freaking kicked down by like 10 people. That was wonderful. And then it wasn't only until I started whining about it, a bunch of people were like, dude, why are you getting attacked? Like it was like the second I started bitching, everybody was like, dude, I got you. It was great. But like that's also interesting too, because obviously as the publisher, you're getting a piece of it. You're publishing their book. Obviously, there's business to be made. And let's be realistic, the Kickstarter helps to fund the book. It helps to get an early jump on publishing. It helps maybe to recoup some money on the art or something else, or it's put to the next issue. It's a seed round. However it's structured, I don't know. But obviously, you have a vested interest in that. And so naturally, you want to get people, funded, even if they only meet their goal or the more money they get, obviously it's the more fuel you have to push the cart. And so it is very interesting the fact that, you're very involved because it makes sense in a lot of ways. And obviously you have a very vested interest in it because if you only do $2,000 on 1,500, you can only go $2,000 far. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, and I
With
think one of the unique things we
1,000,
have
yeah.
is that even though because we always make the rest of our catalog available in the Kickstarter. So people who are discovering lesser known comics for the first time by just finding, the whatever the most recent book is, oh, there's a bunch of books that these people put out, and they go and they order the full catalog, which I think right now is like it's like $100 for like 13 comics and a graphic novel, which is like a pretty rad bundle. You get a lot less for higher, cash points, in different Kickstarter campaigns. Um, but it's cool that at the end of the day, that all the rest of the creators that are part of like LKC, they're like, oh, like I sold nine comics or 20 comics or whatever, right, in a campaign that I really didn't have much to do with, other than maybe retweeting my friends' posts because it was their campaign. So that's been pretty nice. But yeah, I think perpetually being in stress mode, right? Of like not wanting anyone to get let down, or wanting to feel like I belong with part of this team. That's the thing.
Yeah, because it's interesting, and obviously, I mean, I was thrilled that I ran mine, and the only reason I ran mine was people asked for it. They're like, yo, why don't you do a GoFundMe? Why don't you do a Patreon? Why don't you do, buy me a coffee? And I said, I tried all that, and then I was going to run a Kickstarter. It took me a long time to run it. I was hesitant for good reason. And my suspicions of me being hesitant were right and wrong. People really do not like what I did, and people are angry with me still. I get the sense. But I think that model is actually going to be a lot more prevalent in podcasting in the next 5 years. I really do. I just get the sense that it's becoming pay to play, and everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it already. In one fashion or another. So it's only a matter of time before. Because if you go to a con and you pay for a table to sell your books, you're paying to play. You're automatically paying to play. And so it's no different that if you pay to be on a podcast. It's no different. And it's no different in any other fashion. It's no different because it's access. The saying is either you got to buy access or you got to earn access. And earning access with me at this point is getting a lot more complicated. And going into season 4, and I'm going to say it right here, it's not to be mean, but earning access is harder. It's going to be harder than ever because I don't have a problem getting guests. And so if you ask me, you better bring something to the table is all I'm going to say. And you better bring something of value to the table because you being a guest is not valuable. Not you personally. I want to make that crystal clear. But, I think it's really interesting because you're granting access to a lot of people in that bundle, though. And that's kind of why I bring this up, too, is that if you're making the whole catalog available, somebody's book who is either selling decently or not selling decently now is granted access on somebody else's project. And it's almost like renting space in a sense. And so what is that like? Because I think that's actually where Kickstarter needs to go. And which
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer that guilds need to form on Kickstarter. And it sounds weird what I'm saying. And I'm pretty sure that it's borderline complicated on Kickstarter. But if I have a book and you have a book and I should have a package that sells some of your books, and guess what? The solution to that is you don't send me any of your books or I don't buy any of your books until I know how many I need. So all of a sudden you create bundles and packages, or you figure out how to do it that, is within the rules. But again, because the idea is that, and this is just the business mind of me, and anybody could take this, is that if I know that I have 100 friends who can sell 10 of my books a piece, and I know it costs me $3 to produce my book, I could sell it to my friends for 6 and they could sell for 10, and they can sell every campaign 10 of my books, I'll print 5,000 copies of my book at an extremely cheap rate. Because over 3 years, I will make 10 to 15K on it. My friends will make maybe 4K on it collectively after they basically cover their expenses, and everybody's making money.
Yeah, I think the tough part with the guilds that we need to shake out is,
or better yet, I'll throw a better word just to challenge you.
uh,
Let's call it partnerships, right? So
yeah,
so a partnership, for instance, is saying, look, I run every year 6 campaigns. I'm going to need 60 of your books.
yeah,
And it's a partnership. That's all it is. It's a business partnership, or it's a loose business complication saying that, look, me and you and this person, this person, this person are all in an exclusive partnership. Maybe a guild is not a good word for it, but
well,
maybe
yeah,
exclusive business deals, for instance, saying the 10 of us are in this and these are the only 10 people who can buy, and every year I can add 2 new people, but that's per our contract, so that you're
yeah,
not saturating competition.
yeah. So what we're able to do at Lesser Known is that we're able to, when we have everybody who's in Lesser Known, because we have the Lesser Known comics, Lesser
Yes.
Known universe stuff, and then we also have the creator and stuff. The creators are able to get in on that bulk printing rate, because I don't need to print that many copies of each book to hit my bulk printing rate, because we have so many books.
Because this is the inner workings, and that's why this is
Yeah,
beneficial for you, is because
yeah,
you know how many you're running. And that I understand your business completely.
Yeah. Uh,
Most, I don't know how many people truly understand the advantage of bulk printing. And I use the number 5,000 because when you're printing 5,000 copies, you can print significantly cheaper than when you're printing 100.
yeah.
Significantly. Minus anything fancy. If you're printing 5,000 foil covers, you're fucked. Just to be polite about it, you're fucked. No matter which way you cut it, you're screwed. It's going to be expensive. But if you're printing 5,000 cover A's, it's not that expensive. And I know that because of Preston Poulter. Preston
Yeah.
Poulter printed, I think, 3,000 or 5,000 copies of a book, and he handed them out for free as a business card. Brilliant. Utterly brilliant at a con.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, yeah, we just tabled next to somebody who did something similar, and yeah, very smart. And it's a lot easier for the manga stuff because they have black and white interiors.
I could throw you an even crazier deal on that one. If you can print that, but then you put an ad in the middle of your book, you tell the person who's buying the ad that you're doing it, I guarantee you could sell that ad that'll cover your printing costs.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. And now you're at a zero, but you just handed out a boatload of merch, and you just handed out a business card, and you just covered your expenses. Again, when I do a comic, everybody's gonna look at me like I'm crazy. But when I'm tabling at New York Comic Con and I have a first book out there and it's free and I came out making no money, but everybody has my book and I just hand out 10,000 copies of my book, people are gonna be like, "You're launching a Kickstarter next month?" Like, interesting, right?
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if I do that, I'll make bank.
Yeah, so that's part of it. I think we could expand it more, but I think uh, anytime you bring a partner in, there's people who come up and say, "Oh, let's cross promote for a Kickstarter," and it's like, yeah, but I don't really know you, right? Like you could be a dick to people, right? That I care about, so I don't know you, right? Like, and probably not, but I don't want to put our name next to somebody who's out there being an asshole. Or I haven't read your book and I don't have the time to read your book to know that you're gonna, one, deliver your book, or two, like if it's gonna be any
So
freaking good.
let's even talk about that too, because there's actually two questions I have about this.
And
That,
it's a
that
bummer because there's some partnerships out there I've walked away from that were probably great with probably great people making killer stuff, but it was not a risk I was willing to take.
this goes back to I turned down a sizable amount of money because I did not like the product of the person. And I thought it would have hurt my brand in the long run. And I said, I've been working way too hard for this. And this isn't going to work. And I thought the person was going to torture me. And I would rather have taken less money from another sponsor. And I took less money from a lesser sponsor that did not bust my balls and was not going to hurt me. And nobody got hurt with my other sponsor. And I made my other sponsor money. And I wish they continued, but things change. But again, nobody got hurt and my reputation isn't damaged. There's a big difference between that. And I think that's something. And so, but I'm curious about cross promoting too, because I tried cross promoting. It doesn't fucking work. It really
Yeah.
doesn't, in my opinion. It rarely works. I think the cross promotions that sometimes work are the ones that you back this project and this project, you get an art print, but the art print isn't really worth much. And it raises questions is that it's a cool piece, but do I really want to spend double the money that I was going to spend originally? And yeah, and then it raises questions. So I'm curious how you feel about cross promoting and if you think it actually works, because I don't think it does. And I'm biased because it didn't work for me with two or three people. And I'm like, I'm pushing your shit out like crazy, but you didn't help me at
No,
all.
and honestly, I don't think I think we're in such a golden age of, and I apologize, I get more and more congested. I think we're in a golden
Pretty
age of
star,
indie comics.
clearly.
Yeah. Uh, uh,
He knows I'm
the
joking. He knows I'm joking. That's why.
uh, there's too much good stuff out there, so you need to know something about the the options you have out there. So for me as a consumer, because I get I get to see it as a person who makes comics, but then also as a consumer. I see a Kickstarter, cool. Somebody's making a Kickstarter. Just because you're making a Kickstarter, the art looks rad. I've gotten stuff with rad looking cover art and opened it up and it's terrible on the inside. So I need to know you have a track record, that you're any decent. I need to know something about you, a little bit about your story. Like, so if they've done a podcast with somebody like you or somebody like Indie Comics Dispatch or whatever, okay. So now we've narrowed it down to like, you know, 50% of what's out there.
or if they are a podcaster and then they go into comics, but they've been doing
Yeah.
podcasts for 5 years
Mhm.
and they happen to know everybody, or all of a sudden, they happen to have a lot of endorsements that seem genuine.
Yeah. And that would be the last factor there, right? Then I see it pop up from somebody like, Tier from Sovereign Comics and someone like Dan. So, oh wait, both of them talked about it. They were on Andrew's podcast, and it looks good. I'll go back to that campaign. But if it's missing one of those components, yeah, maybe I'll.
Or I'll throw you a third. I'll throw you like a fourth or a fifth one. So let's say it's somebody's brand new Kickstarter, but they were doing something. Justin Hampton, he's a poster artist, and then all of a sudden he's been doing posters for 40 years, and then he's on Kickstarter for the first time with his book that just dropped, brand new to Kickstarter, but the guy has a reputation that precedes him. And the idea is that that he also is working with, a professional Kickstarter group to produce his book. That also changes the game a little bit, I think. Where all of a sudden I know that there's a team behind Justin Hampton that really is helping to run the Kickstarter. Or I had Larry Welts on, and there was a team behind Larry. Now Larry did Cherry Pop. And so like that's one of those, adult comics that's sort of like Mandy, and it's kind of like a Playboy type comic where it was in those types of magazines. So now if Larry does a Kickstarter, I know for a fact that the reputation precedes itself. And so there's a built-in credibility. And then you also look at who's behind it. I forget who was running Larry Weltz's campaign, but he or she, I forget who it was, but they've done a lot of work. And so I know they're not, and they set up the interview with me and Larry. So I know for a fact that the thing isn't going to get fucked up, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, we'll have a lot more patience for the ones that get fucked up if they have the other four components, right? Where it's like, oh, this is somebody, they're part of the tribe, right? They're part of the indie comics tribe. They're out there, they've backed other campaigns,
Larry
run with
Welch
the
is
same.
like the foundation.
No, but like when the campaign, because I had some buddies, they ran a campaign and they want to do a very untraditional size book. So like with the supply chain issues, it got delayed super. But it was like, it's fine. I know them. They're not going anywhere. They're
I
still
don't think
out there.
that's the issue. See, let me ask you a question on this. I'm pissed at somebody right now, and it's actually pissed off a lot of other people that they're working with in a particular company. I got no problem saying who it is. I just don't want to get you in trouble. Because I don't know who. I'll tell you off air. But the point is that I've been very vocal about it, and I said, look, it took the person. So the project was supposed to be out in May of this year. It was backed in May of 2021. No updates throughout the whole year. Now we're in May, no book. Okay, now 2 months later, after I started complaining on air, and I called him out privately, I called him out publicly because I didn't do that yet. I said, "Hey man, where the hell's the book, dude? Like, I'm excited for it. You should really do an update." And I kind of told him that, and then he did an update because clearly I started bitching about it. And I started not maybe I'm a little intimidating, but if you don't update me for 14 months, we're long past the point of messing up.
Mhm.
The likelihood of me getting this book now is like 30%.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's $30. I'm not going to go to war over $30, but I also look at who he's working with, and he did a campaign that did like 17,000 on Kickstarter for another book. And I'm like, wait a second, how am I supposed to feel? And he did it through another publisher. And my response to that publisher is saying, he didn't fulfill on this book, yet you know that. So now I have to call out the publisher for booking that writer while he had doing a $20,000 more or less campaign for not fulfilling another book. And I'm going to start doing it. And I think I have to. I don't think I have a choice in the matter. That's when I have a problem. And that's where cross promotion gets complicated. It doesn't it? Because now if you cross promote with that individual and I call them out and I go on a tirade and a bunch of other people are like, wait a second, what happened? Why is Andrew upset? And then all this other stuff starts coming out and then you're cross promoted, you're going to get heat for it, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, if I'm going to say something nice about something, I also want to mean it, right? So if I'm saying that I believe in a project, like some people can throw out those words and they'll be empty words to them. But if I tell you to go read a book, like I really want you to read that book,
And so I mean, I'm just curious your thoughts on it because I am very set in my ways. I'm very set in my ways on this right now, and but it takes me a while to get here. I mean, at this point, like with this book in particular, and I'm owed 4 books are long overdue that I'm owed out of 3 of them are not matured yet. 4 of them out of the 7 that are owed I'm owed them. So that's an issue. One of them just actually came in and it was supposed to be here in December and it came in November. So that's early. So very happy about that. It's a cool book, but it's not even a comic. It's a wrestling biography, which is cool. Oh, the Bushwhackers. Guys, go watch that interview. That's all I'm going to say. But anyway, I'm just curious your thoughts on that because obviously as a consumer and as a creator and as an owner, I think that it's complicated, right? Because you want to do the best for your work, but you got to protect your company and you got to also protect the people who work for your company in a lot of ways, both creator owned and not creator owned, if that makes any sense. Because if you're working with, I think Ray Garza does I can't think, Digital Lizards at Doom, right?
That's Gabe Valentine who does.
I'm sorry, I get everybody mixed up, but they were. I think they were both on, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I get everybody mixed up. It's been a long day. Anyway, it's been a very trying day for me at my job. Let's just say that when you're dealing with coding, it could be a headache. When you're not a coder. But anyway, the point is that with Digital Lizards of Doom, you don't own that, but it's published somewhat through you, and you have a contractual obligation to protect it. And the last thing you want is if you fuck up your creator-owned stuff, that's a different ballgame than if you fuck up somebody who's publishing through you shit.
Yeah.
There's a different standard. And not that you want to screw up anything, but if you own something, if I own this show. So if I screw up this show, it's different if somebody's on my network or using, my platform, but they own the show. And then I hurt the network. It's a different ball game completely.
Yeah, and going into 2023, that's actually one of the things that we're looking at is
networks or screwing up your company.
Screwing up the company. Yeah,
You're making this way too easy for me.
Yeah, creating less opportunity for that, right? Because even
well, I guess you're not coming on this show ever again. That's clear.
Because even if everything goes right, or actually, even on its best days, with the best intentions, there's so much opportunity for things to go off the rails. Just in terms of
you look at this show right here, we're already 50% screwed up your company. What? An hour, 20 minutes in? Imagine what we'll do in the next 40 minutes. It's amazing.
I know. I'm gonna be like, I knew I shouldn't have taken that interview while sick. I've lost the whole company. It
Oh, no, 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 no. If you weren't sick, it would have been worse.
would have been worse. I would have just moved faster. Yeah.
Obviously, we're joking. We're clearly joking, but you're onto something. I'm just making fun of a situation, but even still, I mean, there's a reason why, and I'm very open. During the first season of the show, I did 90 interviews, and I just said, hey, people need help. It's COVID. People are getting fucked over, right? And then season 2, it was open season. I took everybody. So I'm like, yeah, we'll just continue it. And then obviously I rejected some people just because, you know what, sometimes you're just not in the mood to do something. Sometimes you got 10 options and you can only take 8. And you just don't, and it's nothing against those 2 people. They just don't interest you. And then season 3, it was paid. And then I was trying to get what I could get. And then I was very selective this year. And I'm now becoming more selective in season 4 because I think I've earned the right. I've also realized that I can get a lot of interesting people on my show, and that, you know what is, when you start picking and choosing the best out of, everybody, you start to have a lot more power. And guess what? There's less opportunity for me to fuck this show up if I have 95 to 98% control.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that you bring that up, because I don't know how many people in comics truly start realizing that you can screw up everything you built with 2 or 3 stupid decisions in comics. And it's the petty fights. It's bitching about stuff. It's attacking stuff. It's people attacking creators. I mean, you can not produce. You can produce the greatest comic in the world, but still mess up because you attacked the wrong person, or you got into a petty fight that then went a whole different direction. And you've seen it, and I've seen it, right?
Oh yeah, and luckily, because we actually have a sponsorship with our printer, Comics Wellspring, and
What does
of
everybody?
course, what was that?
Everybody has that one.
The Comics Wellsprings were very good to us, and we were talking about kind of code of conduct and how we respond to some of that negativity that comes, because um, yeah, you'll get attacked. You'll get attacked by people, on social media and whatnot. So, my response, as much as I don't want to do this, is to kill them with kindness, to just be like, all right, yeah, sure, cool, like what, um, uh, but
Oh,
it would,
well, you're better than me, because my new solution is this: if I run a Kickstarter and I get attacked, I'm going to invite the person on my show, and we're going to talk about why you don't think that I shouldn't ask for money, and then I'm going to say, but you do realize that if you come on my show, you can't also ask for money. I'll end my Kickstarter here if you end yours, and agree, and we're going to sign a contract, and we're going to see how fast they respond, because I'm going to bury somebody. And,
yeah,
and, and I have a very different opinion now, because my attacks were brutal, and my solution is to go back and push the line back. And maybe I'm different. If I have a sponsor, I'm gonna say, look, this is how we're doing it, and we're gonna enter a fight, and I guarantee you're gonna come out much better. We're all gonna come out better for it. But
yeah,
better on you, man. Better on you. But I also was not expecting what happened to me when I got attacked,
yeah,
and it was pretty brutal. It was pretty brutal, and it was inappropriate. And the people were attacking me. It's the funniest thing too. The guy who was the main attacker, I threw my thing. I said, "Oh, I have a book. Can I be interested? Why don't you back the Kickstarter?" And then he basically said, "Oh, your show sucks." After I asked for money. So you asked for money. I told you about my Kickstarter. I said, "Hey, why don't you back it?" And then he said my show sucked, and it started attacking me.
yeah,
Go figure that
yeah,
one out, right?
yeah. It's and I think and I spent close to 20 years in the army. I'm kind of done fighting with people, and the other thing too is that um, yeah, a lot of those people, they don't want to have that conversation, it's easy to be tough, from behind your keyboard and stuff like that. But face to face, it's a whole different
Because
story.
I've had this discussion in which the solution is that I'm not going to be a bulldog if you come on my show, but if we disagree on certain things, we're going to have a
Hmm.
conversation. I have disagreed with people on certain topics, and again, I'm not a bulldog. I'm just going to stick to a point. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Why do you think X? And all of a sudden, you're going to have somebody who's calm on one side, and you're going to have somebody saying you're just trying to fund your project, and you're attacking somebody for funding their project. And then the trick for me is that I'll just advertise the entire interview like crazy on Facebook, and a bunch of people will see it, and that person will be now known as a pariah in comics. And the thing will be addressed in a very different way, because I believe that people will be like, what just happened? This is kind of weird. And that's me. And that's the play that I'm betting on. And so if people attack me, this is the end result, because somebody will take the bait, and then I will never be attacked again. That's the goal. That's the goal. That's the whole goal, is to prove a point and never be attacked again. But people
Yeah.
hate me. People really have an issue with me still. I smell it, dude. I smell it in the water. And it's amazing. It's amazing when you smell it and you see people's interactions with you. It's so interesting when you see it, and you realize that you've gone to the next level. And so I'm curious about that, because are you seeing that too? Because me and Pat Shand were talking about this. He did a book that did 100,000 on a Kickstarter, but he's Zenoscope. He doesn't normally do 100,000. He does about 35 to 40 per Kickstarter, which is great. He's a Zenoscope writer. He did some stuff for IDW. He's creator-owned stuff. But one of the things is that he did 100,000 on Kickstarter, and he said, "Oh, people feel now more comfortable to ask me for stuff." And I said, "I don't feel comfortable asking you for anything. I feel weird still. I feel even more weird for asking you now for an interview, because you did like 100,000." But the part of the reason why I get Pat Shand is that I buy a lot of Zenoscope stuff, and I do a lot of stuff with Zenoscope, and I interview a lot of their creators. And I've had Joe Brush on, Ralph Tedesco's been on, Dave Franchini's been on. I'm getting Dave Wall from like Top Cow and Witchblade. But yeah, so, but do you feel, getting back to the question, do you feel that now that you're sort of climbing up that ladder, that people are viewing you a little bit differently too? Because that's how I view this season in a lot of ways, is that I think people are viewing me in a very different way. And I think people haven't asked me because of the Kickstarter, and there's been a shift in attitude and even what I'm trying to accomplish.
I try to tell people, to hit me up and not be a stranger. And I try to meet people where their effort is. So, um, I was at Comic Con this weekend, and somebody had made a comic themselves. They stapled together, just like they printed out paper and they stapled it together, and it looked sick. It looked dope. I was like, this is rad. You gave me a comic, I'm going to give you a comic, right? I know that it costs more to print my comic than to print your comic, but that's where I am at the journey, and that's where you are at the journey. Like, your thing's dope. Like, you did what you could, and you're here. I did what I could, and I'm here. That's irrespective, right? To me, that's a fair trade. And I try and treat people like that. I try and treat people to the fact of, because I've actually had conversation with Dan Price about, why don't you come over to Lesser Known Comics, and actually I haven't asked him really too, because I think he's doing great on his own, right? And same thing with Chris Wigan. He does a comic book called Tights that just came to Lesser Known. I was surprised as well, right? I was like, oh, why would you bring your comic here? Like, you're doing fantastic without me. But I try to always treat people the same, whether they publish with us, whether they do business with us, that they have access to us, just as long as they come like respectful, and stuff like that. And I think for the most part, um, the I've actually seen less um, stone throwing or something like that, or maybe like I notice it less because I have less time to deal with it. You know
That,
what I
that
mean?
that's interesting. That's
Like, because
interesting.
if you have 100 followers and one of them's a troll, then that's versus if you have 10,000 followers and one of them's a troll. You know what I mean? So, I don't know, but I've also just
I
been busy
guess
and surrounded by good people who don't let me pay attention to the bullshit. That's for sure.
so. For me, what it is that I guess I notice it a lot more because I'm doing something that I think is unique, and I clearly, get interesting guests, and I get people that I somewhat, for a lot, punch above my weight, and I think people are really wondering how I'm doing it, and how I'm getting certain people, and how I'm doing what I'm doing, and how I'm, sort of, I think what I like to view as thriving and doing all right, and what I've noticed is that unfortunately, people like to attack people when they're at the top. I also think that people like to attack people who have different opinions on certain issues and think differently. And that's what happens. And I've also stopped, holding my tongue on issues. And I've also had more controversial interviews lately. I'm about to have one tomorrow night, and it's not. And oddly enough, though, when I had Mike Brown on the first time talking about that, I didn't get much attack for that one. But this one, I'm going to get attacked for. And people have had issues with me. And I've also been more just, I guess, privy to it because I know more drama that's going on. I know so many people's businesses, and I know so many people's, issues with each other. And so that's something too that I'm very aware of because as an interviewer, I need to know who can come on a show and who can't at the same time. I need to know that because it's just good business. So if I know person A and person B don't like each other, I don't want to put person A or person B who I have good relationships with on the same show and have them pissed at me and at each other and create a issue. I don't want that. And so I need to know more. And so I'm more in tune to the drama, not because I want to be, but because I want to avoid controversy that is not good controversy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think you know,
Being controversial, what me and Mike Brown are going to talk about tomorrow is him being shadow banned on Indiegogo of his project. You can't type his project in on Indiegogo and it won't come up. And we're going to be talking about that. That is controversial, but that's not going to get two people hating each other, starting a fight on my show.
is that what is that the new one, Private Citizen?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a conversation about that, and
Mhm.
but it's bigger. It's bigger than Indiegogo because the question is that when is it going to happen on Kickstarter? That's the real question with him because it's Mike Barron's on Indiegogo, which is where it should not be. This should have happened on Kickstarter. He should have been banned on Kickstarter with this project, not on Indiegogo. And so it raises a lot of questions about a lot of stuff. And we're going to have a very interesting conversation about it because I'm just waiting for somebody's project to get shadow banned on Kickstarter because that's when it's going to matter.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I think and it may be um, uh, because I've been on Pop Show a couple times. I was on with the guy Apex Comics, obviously yours. I did the High Stream, um, and I think it goes back to um, like I'm probably don't agree with most of the things that a large share of those folks on those streams have,
You'd be
but
surprised. You'd be
but
surprised.
but I think they've always treated me respectfully. I've tried to treat them respectfully, and try to support each other's books. And
So
that's the
this is the thing about Pops' show, and I don't mind saying this. So obviously, Pops has opinions on certain things, but guess what? Most of that stuff doesn't come out. Most of Pop's stuff is not political. I don't think anything is political on Pops' show. Nothing is political on my show for the most part. I'm
Mhm.
having Mike Barron on. That's not much political. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
obviously, his book leans right, but it's not extremism. And if you think his book is extremism, I don't know what to say to you. Thin Blue Line was not an extreme book by any stretch of the imagination. and I call it down the middle. Now, was it obviously more right than left? Yeah, that's a fair assessment, but it wasn't like crazy. I mean, it was a book about two police officers trying to get home and get the mayor out from a massive riot that went wrong. That's
Yeah.
a not really political. That's just a crazy situation.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I
And
don't.
it did two hundred
There's some.
thousand dollars. So clearly something was right with that book.
Yeah. You know, there's something, unfortunate that's happening in the country where we can't have a beer with somebody and disagree with them anymore. You know what I mean? And that's like what I try and do is, if it really doesn't matter, right? You know, um, it's
I
like,
mean, I've been called everything. Every word you could think of that has been hurtful, I've been called.
yeah,
And what's crazy about me is that you look at every interview I've done, I've had arguably one of the most diverse shows in all of comics, I
yeah,
think, in the interview game. I've had everybody, I've had people from all over the world. And I'm
mhm,
like, so you call me A, B, C, and D?
mhm,
Yet, where did I say anything against any of those people?
yeah.
Just because I hate everybody doesn't mean that I'm targeting anybody alone.
But
Um,
that's the thing, right? I think you're all equally useless, like.
but all jokes aside, I mean it's crazy. But again, I just know everybody's drama because I don't want you know to bring two people who hate each other on. But
Yeah,
I would much rather not, and I would
yeah,
much rather. But I also say to people, I'm hosting a panel show. I let every guest on my panel show know who's coming on
yeah,
for the most part. You know, And I said, do you have an issue with so and so? Because if you do, I'm going to politely get you on a different show that they're not on so we don't fight. There are people
yeah,
who have issues with each other. They will not come on my show at the same time. And it's for both of those people. Because guess what? You know how that ends? That ends with me having two relationships ending, not one.
yeah.
Or, and it creates a problem. But I digress. I do want to talk about your rewards, though, briefly, before I give you a chance to for one to tell you all the dirt about everybody else. You have a digital copy of your book, which is pretty cheap. You have a physical copy. Your physical copies are what, like $10?
Yeah, $10.
And the blank
So
cover's $10 too, right?
yeah, so that's for the sketch cover if somebody wants to draw their own. We do have a custom sketch cover one that Reese Jenkins, who did the variant cover, uh, he's an insane artist, does great work. Since he's here in New York and Franco's down in Argentina, we had Reese do the custom variants. He did have his exclusive variant. We're only making 25 of those available. And I think we put that at $20
It's 20 or
current.
25. It's around
Yeah.
there. I forget which one it is, but it's 20, $25.
But yeah,
Um,
he's gonna sign a number of those, so that'll be really cool.
So, and,
Um,
and what I like about that is that that's a collector's item more than a comic at that point. And so what I like about that is that you actually include the digital in that one because one
yeah,
of my biggest pet peeves, and I don't get it, is when people send me or say you could buy a physical for $10, but then you for $2 extra you get the digital, and I'm like, really? Really? If you're gonna like and that's my response back to them is like, really? You need those extra $2 for me? Like there's a problem here, but it's a pet peeve of mine and it actually turns me off from backing people's campaigns.
yeah. I bet most people don't even know, don't even realize. But at the end of the day, I think like $5 in my mind gives you access to the book, at least in the digital way. Anything after that, you're getting additional perks, right? Whether it's a physical copy, a variant copy, a sketch cover, this,
Oh,
that, and
I
the other.
think that
But
any if
yeah,
I spend
but
$25 on your
yeah.
book and then you don't even give me a digital, and we have an issue. It's the idea that I'll give you an example of this. I backed Cat Shit One by Ben Dunn in Antarctic Press. Um, I put Cat Shit One on my shelf because I love Cat Shit One. Cat Shit One is one of my favorite things to watch. It's so ridiculously stupid. I never ever got to read the manga, but he sent it digitally too. I have it digitally on my computer. It's so much easier for me to read it digitally than it is for me to crack open the book.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do but I want it as a physical book on my bookshelf. I like looking at Cat Shit 1 on my bookshelf. I have Ninja High School, the swimsuit editions by Ben Dunn. I like looking at them on my bookshelf. I don't want to open them up, but I read them digitally because they're fun. That's my point, is that there gets to a point where if you don't send it to me, it drives me crazy. So I do like the fact that you actually send it digital. I think you send the digital with all of them. Anything above the digital tier, I think.
Yeah. If it's not listed, you're definitely getting it.
Because for me, you know, some people say, look, I don't want to open up it. I don't want to ruin it. I'm a collector and I want to keep it mint, right? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my buddy Phil told me that he always destroys any book that he touches. So, you know, he's got one for keeps and then one to actually read, that being the digital.
And then you have the lesser known universe, you know, catalog, you got the starter pack, you got the custom sketch cover, I think you got the full catalog. So obviously there's just a lot of stuff in there. And then I'm sure that do you have a retail package too?
We don't, not on this one, just because it was getting pretty heavy on the tiers. But we did the lesser known universe one that has everything that's happening within the same universe. And then because we brought on so many new books, I decided to make the starter pack, which is basically just like the first issue of everything in the collection. So if you didn't want to go like the full catalog, you could at least just get like the first issue of everything that we have in the lesser known catalog.
Yeah, and then there's just a bunch of stuff as well. And obviously, if there's something you want, and then I'm sure, are you doing add-ons too for other things? So if somebody just missed something and they're like, look, I'm back in this thing, but, you know, I missed issue, 5 of so-and-so, or I missed, some weird issue or something, obviously, are you doing those add-ons as well? Because people need to fill in holes.
Yeah, so everything's available, as add-ons as well, so that you can because we know we've launched a lot of Kickstarters, and sometimes people have missed one or two or whatever. So that's an easy way. Or maybe they're just not interested in all of it. They're just like, I only care about the vampire stuff. I'm going to grab Yuriko, or I only care about Tank McGregor. I'm going to add Tank McGregor in there. So
or maybe somebody only has like $30. You know what I mean? In which that I'm on a budget with Kickstarters, and I am fully spent out pretty much for the year because I may or may not have bought something today that was super cool that Lessico, and to watch that was purposely said, and so I'm all tapped out, everybody. I am tapped out for the year, unless something is super mecha oriented. That's the only time I will buy some now for the rest of the year on Kickstarter. But having said that, obviously, Pat Chan gave me a piece of advice that I think is relevant, is you should always have everything available from your last Kickstarter on your next Kickstarter. And the reason why, and not a variant per se, but even a cover A of your book. So, if you're doing 5 Kickstarters, you should always have the cover A from those. And the reason why is people sometimes don't have money at certain times of the year. And other times of the year they do. And there you go. I had a friend named Gage who missed Prison Witch, which is by Pat Chan. Pat Chan ran it. So the physical tier was $6, and then he added the 3 Prison Witches for $60 on the new campaign for Destiny in New York. And so there you go. So Pat made a $60 sale by having Prison Witch, which is available to my friend who missed it when the campaign was being run for the last one. And if he didn't put that on there, it would have been $66 he didn't have. So
yeah, it always blows my mind when I see people come in and they pick up the whole catalog. Like, one, it is good, like, for them too, especially because the shipping, right? Like, that's the cheapest way to get all the books, especially with shipping. But two, I'm just like, man, I can't believe this person just bought 14 books from our team today. That's just really cool.
I bought all of Pat Chan's Destiny New York up to volume 6. Now, the next one he runs, which will be volume 7, I'm only going to buy volume 7, but I caught up. So I caught up all in one, segment. And so that's really, really helpful. And so it's good for me too, because guess what? I save money on shipping. Shipping's a bitch. It sucks. And I want my life convenient. Now I'm going to have to wait a year. But the best part of what Pat did is he sent me the first 5 digitally immediately because they're done.
Yeah.
And that's what's helpful too, because now I actually have reading to do. I have like 700 pages of reading to do.
Yeah.
While I wait. But I
have
digress.
a Kickstarter dysfunction, so I gotta show you these are all the Kickstarters that haven't even been opened yet. These boxes are filled with actual boxes, the Geminis that I have opened. This one too, but yeah, I can't even. I got a lot to go through.
This is why I'm ending my season in November. There's 2 reasons why. My sister's coming with my niece, and she's staying for a month. And so, in fairness to me, in fairness to her, and for me not to get killed, because a woman with a brand new child is a very scary thing. And I also don't want to keep my niece up. I don't want to hear crying in the background. And it's just best for all parties involved for me just to end my season and for peace to be restored in my house and for my niece to get actually sleep while she's a growing toddler. And also I'm burned out. So it's literally 14 wins and 1 L. So the only people who lose is you, the fans who have Kickstarters in December. I'm sorry. Somebody has to sacrifice here.
Making the right decision.
There's like, if you run a Kickstarter in December, maybe we'll do special edition. I don't know, but I think very few people run in December. I think very few people do. Which was the smartest play to do here is if there's a month to take off, it's December. But I digress. Yeah. Unless you're running in December, if you are, I mean,
well, we're running one in November for It's a Horror Show, but even at that, we pushed the fulfillment back a month just because I remember with Christmas cards getting sent back, back to sender because shipping during Christmas is a nightmare. So if we run it November, ship in December, the amount of lost books or late books, so I think we're actually going to wait till after the Christmas.
Nobody cares about that. No, nobody cares about it because it's not a Christmas book, so nobody cares, right? Unless, is it a Christmas book?
No, it's not.
Then it's not a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love this one.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. This is one of those ones where I didn't intend on picking up this book, bring it onto the catalog, but then you read just a book that's so good, it's like, fuck it, okay. We're making room for you.
Well, I mean, we've been speaking for a while, and I got to give you a bunch of dirt, so off the air about everybody who I have issues with, and you'll appreciate it because it'll be good to avoid. But I do want to give you a chance to self-promote because you got a lot of stuff coming. You got a lot of stuff going on, and obviously, at least twice a year, hopefully you'll be on my show. I don't know if I can get you maybe 3 times, but I like to space people out. But anyway, where can people find you, bother you, check out the campaign, check out what you're doing, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, lesserknowncomics.com. That's a great starting point. It'll also get you the landing page will bring you to Kickstarter. On Instagram at lesserknowncomics, and then on Twitter at lesserkcomics. That was the best we could do. We got the Kickstarter going until November 6th. For Either Them or Us, for anybody who's a fan of Samurai versus Witches in 1980s Japan. And I thank you so much, man, for having me on and for powering through my congestion and my snottiness. I really appreciate it, Andrew. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, and then just about me, and then I'm going to keep saying it. You have to support indie. What that means is you got to support people's comics, you got to support people's projects, or whether it's, comics, films, wrestling promotions, whatever it is, you have to support what they're doing if you want to see more of it, and you need to financially support it as well. So that means going buying the merch, guys, buying comics, t-shirts, whatever else people are selling makes a big difference. And if you're going to support obviously People's Comics, you should be supporting podcasts too, because it is independent media, and independent media in all forms is more important than ever right now. And there are several companies that have started off very, very independent and are slowly but surely replacing the mainstream. And they give a very interesting perspective. So obviously, it's very important to support them and support this show. And the way you do that is you buy me a coffee, guys. The link is in the description. I absolutely appreciate when people buy me a coffee. It makes a huge difference in my world. It's super important, but it is not necessary because I get it. Money's tight. But I do appreciate when people do it. But if you can't buy me a coffee, you should absolutely follow me on social media. That's Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, anywhere else where you are on social media. I am there. Obviously, I also have a Facebook group, Indie Comic Connect. It's free to post there. It's free to join. So feel free to go and join that group because it does make a big difference. And, it's a free group to share your stuff out. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. And I do have a comic book class coming at some point, and I still have some cool metal cards like this right here available up on eBay with my boy DJ Croft right there. And I have this right here. She is really, really hot unless she is holding a knife while you are waking up to her holding the knife over your head. And in that case, you should probably run. So that's all I'm going to say. But both of those things are metal cards, and they're super cool. This is actually limited to 121. And this one is limited to 50. And I am in the process of building out a few more that are going to be interesting, that I am sure that some people are going to love and some people are going to hate. And then the final thing I have is my t-shirt right here on Redbubble. It's available in 16 different colors. It's making fun of Gundam, Taco Bell, the most interesting man in the world, and Fallout. So it's a cool shirt, and I have a few more ideas coming down the pike come 2023. Dealing with Gundam, food, and some other stuff because I'm a huge Gundam fan. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Just thank you so much, Andrea. I really appreciate, man. It's always great to have a chat with you, man.
Well, on that note, I think everybody, that is a wrap.